Welcome, everyone, to the Disrupting Wellbeing podcast. I'm so excited for the whole season 2, the types of guests we're having. And of course, I'm offering some kind of practical advice sessions as well throughout this podcast. And today, I'm so excited about this conversation. I've got Dana Chapman, and I'll let you introduce yourself. But from what I've gathered and what I've seen, you're an expert in gut-brain health. I know you're a keynote speaker. You've got neurodiversity expertise, as well as you're a nutritional therapist. Welcome to the show. Give us a little insight into who you are and what you do.
Thank you so much, Petra, and thank you so much for having me on. Yes, like you said, I am a nutritional therapist. That is my qualification, or my latest qualification, I should say. I come from a corporate background, so I used to work at one of the big 4 consulting firms, which I thoroughly enjoyed. I didn't leave it because I didn't like the consulting world. I left it because I love health and well-being even more. So it took me about 7 years to retrain into nutritional therapy, and the degree that backs that is what we call nutrition science. So it is a degree-based, evidence-based profession, and very much use that lens of understanding how the physiology of the body works in total, and that being the realization as to the reason why we may be showing symptoms. So mental health is the overarching area that I specialize in. And within that, the gut-brain axis plays such a large role and is such a fascinating area to me. So that is how I've sort of ended up going into mental health, but very much through that gut-brain axis link.
And I don't think there's enough voices in the mental health space on this particular angle. And it's not kind of integrated into kind of everyday mental health practice, as far as I'm aware, when it comes to working in organizations or even physical health. It's like, oh, mental health's over here, physical health is over here, and you get 2 different specialists for it. Talk us through like the connection from your perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's one of the reasons why I went into mental health, because as I was transitioning out of the corporate world and into the nutritional therapy world, mental health was being spoken about a lot more in that corporate space, but nobody was talking about how people can actually support themselves to heal or to get better from that mental health. And completely agree. Everybody thinks that the health of the body and the health of mind are completely separate, but they are so very much intertwined. And the reasons being is the theory of poor mental health being a lack of neurotransmitters such as serotonin and dopamine and GABA. That theory has been disproved, but we can't negate the fact that to have good mental health, you need to have good levels of those hormones that make us happy, of that serotonin, of that GABA, of that dopamine. And in fact, we know that the majority of those hormones or neurotransmitters are made in the gut. And we can't separate gut health from normal health because we need nutrients to be able to create these neurotransmitters. And the way that we get those nutrients is from the diet. So there very much is that interconnection of gut health being important for mental health. But then you can also think about the gut-brain axis and the role that plays. And we know now through the research that 90% of signals go from gut to brain, only 10% of signals go from the brain to the gut. So very much, if the gut is not happy, you are not going to be happy. And we need to start thinking of, our bodies don't just work by magic. They work in very specific chemical processes. And the raw ingredients for those are what we get through our diet. And then on a different angle, we can't really negate the fact that lifestyle factors have a large role to play as well.
I was curious about that because I was thinking, how much is our gut health, as you say, about the nutrition piece? And how much is it about environmental factors? Do both play a part, or is that something totally different?
Yeah, both play a part, absolutely. So I always give the example of to create serotonin. Serotonin's actually made from tryptophan, which is an amino acid. But you need B vitamins and things like magnesium and iron to make the conversion from that tryptophan into your serotonin, which is your happy hormone. So that very much comes from the diet. But then you start looking at lifestyle factors such as stress And we know that stress has got a negative impact on our gut health. It shuts our gut health down. It shuts the gut function down. So we're not then able to digest our food. And if we can't digest our food, we can't absorb the nutrients from that food, which means that we don't have the raw ingredients to be able to make our neurotransmitters. But we also know that stress depletes the gut microbiome. And it's the gut microbiome that also then does this communication role to the brain. And if there's stress, it's that gut microbiome that can communicate to the brain to say, we're in a stress situation. Let's start shutting things down. Let's start activating that stress response, which makes you hypervigilant. And it's all that prefrontal cortex stuff that gets involved there as well.
This is so interesting. And I'm jotting down some notes because like the questions I'd had, I'm going to scrap them because my curiosity is taking me in a totally different direction. So we'll see what, okay. Before I go into some of these questions, I'm always curious about people's like personal passion and like why have you gotten into this? Like where's your personal passion stemming from? Because I find for many people in mental health, which is what the field that I'm in, we've all struggled with our mental health at some point, or someone close to us has. It's deeply personal. So I'm curious around your story there.
I suppose I got into mental health, like I said, because of the life situation of when I was transitioning out of that corporate world and into the nutritional therapy world. And I suppose the reason I got into nutritional therapy in the first place was because I was just so fascinated that food had such a large impact on our bodies and on how our bodies actually functioned. So I got into nutritional therapy because I wanted to lose weight when I was a teenager. And I didn't want to do the whole yo-yo dieting. I knew that that was unsustainable. So I started reading up about how to become healthy because I thought if I become healthy, then surely I will lose a little bit of weight. And I was just then so fascinated that eating certain foods that had certain ingredients, certain nutrients like B vitamins were important for using carbohydrates, fat, and protein to create energy. And I was like, yeah, definitely. I want energy because I was playing hockey 6 days a week and I was about to write my A levels. So you need energy to both perform on the hockey pitch and energy to be able to then go and study. So that's sort of how I got into nutritional therapy, is just that fascination that you could eat certain foods and they would help certain processes in the body just work better. Skin health, you can eat vitamins A, C, and E, which is going to help with detoxification, which is going to help improve your skin health. So that's sort of how I got into nutritional therapy. And then, like I say, when I was transitioning from that corporate market into the nutritional therapy world, I was in one of the big four consulting firms. And of course, they were amazing at educating us on, you need to sleep well to be able to have good health and mental health. They started talking about stress management and talking therapies. If you are struggling with your mental health, they started bringing in things like yoga and lunchtime runs, and all of that was amazing. But they weren't talking about something that people do multiple times a day, which is eat, which is how we are able to support our bodies and minds to function at their best. Nobody was talking about food and how they can use food to help support their mental health. Nobody was talking about gut health and how gut health is so important for mental health. So that's sort of why I chose to do my dissertation actually on the link between stress, gut health, and mental health. And it's because of that period of time. So I can't say that I've ever suffered with my own poor mental health, but I'm just so passionate and fascinated by the fact that you can support yourself in a way that is achievable for everyone. And that's sort of why I got into this space of, really trying to help educate people that they don't need to accept a diagnosis of poor mental health. And the solution, if you do have poor mental health, is not just, take this antidepressant, which you may or may not then be on for the rest of your life. It's about trying to get a little bit more curious about what's going on in your body. Why is your body giving you that symptom? What is the root cause of it? And let's address that rather than, let's just apply some band-aids to the condition that you feel that you've got.
So many people today, I work in workplaces, organizations, many people today stress, overwhelm, and it's not even, there's workload, there's meeting culture, there's toxicity, there's like in that immediate environment. And then we've got like the global environment, right? Where people have notifications pinging on their phone and there's war over here and cost of living crises and this, that, and the other, right? And from my perspective, all of that is triggering our nervous system to be in survival mode or to give us more stress, right? Whatever it looks like for people. So I'm curious because you've written a paper on it and, so we've got gut health, we've got mental health, and we've got stress. I'm kind of doing it like a triangle for people listening. You might think of it totally differently, but where does someone start? Like, is it like you got to reduce the stress in order to do the nutrition? Like, how do we think about getting started if we're in that place I just described?
I always say start with the stress, and nobody can take stress away. And that's the unfortunate thing. We can't take stress away. But what we're not doing is we're not building in those stress relieving activities. We're not going outside first thing in the morning and getting that sunlight exposure into our eyes and onto our bodies and setting that proper circadian rhythm. We may be drinking caffeine multiple times a day, which actually causes you to secrete more stress hormones. So I always say, let's start with the management of stress.
Can I just pause you? I'm a coffee
Yeah.
drinker. How much,
Yeah.
if any, is okay? Is any coffee okay?
So there's been lots of research into coffee, and yes, it does have health benefits, but I would say limiting it to about 3 cups a day maximum.
I'm okay then.
I love coffee as well. I'll put that up there. I drink coffee.
What you're saying is assessing your personal lifestyle, your relationship to stress, how you're managing that stress, and what are the other factors that might be contributing. So start with assessing the stress. Have I got that right?
Yeah, and there's also been research into just changing the perception of stress reduces the impact that it has on our physiology. So the negative health impacts that we get from stress can be changed simply by changing the perception of that stress. So instead of starting your day going, I've got 5 meetings, I've got to get the kids to school, I've got to pick the kids up, I've got to rush to an activity. Instead of thinking of all of that as, oh my gosh, what an awful day I've got ahead of me, just changing the perception of that. Right, I'm just going to focus on the next hour. What do I need to do in the next hour? Can I do that in a calm way? Does it need to mean that I need to be stressed if I've got all of these things in my diary? So changing the perception of stress can be something that you can work on because, like I said, you can't take that stress away. But then it is also about thinking, yes, doing a stress audit and seeing if there is anything that you can knock off that list. Like, what can you not stress about? What can you take out of that day that is contributing to your stress load? But then it's also about what stress relieving activities am I doing? Am I, spending time in nature? Am I doing a yoga class once a week or twice a week? Am I doing 10 minutes of breath work in a day? Am I trying to do meditation? All of those things that we don't think about helps us recover from that stress because stress is a natural response. Stress is necessary, but we're not recovering from that stress. And that's when the negative health impacts start to affect us.
Very, very useful reminders. Okay, so we've kind of looked at our stress. And as I always say, we've got to focus on what's in our control, maybe let go of what isn't in our control. So that's to your point around perception. So let's turn to food. Now, while none of us are experts, none of us are experts, we kind of know like good food, bad food, right? Green vegetables, good, lots of sugar, bad, right? But it's interesting when we're stressed, there is this, I mean, I'm sober, so I have more of an addictive component than maybe other people. But there's this addictive component, isn't there? When we're feeling stressed, triggered, emotions. I mean, why don't we like naturally grab the carrot sticks, right? We go for the sugar, we go for the things that we know cause inflammation and that feel good in the moment. You talked about dopamine. So like a quick hit of something, some avoidance. And then over time, of course, we're hurting ourselves because we get more stressed off the back of it and all the rest of it. So what's the nuance there when it comes to good versus bad? Like, how do we navigate it?
I always say understanding the physiology a bit actually might help understand why you're going for those high fat, high sugar foods. And there's two reasons physiologically why that might be. When we are stressed, our stress hormones are actually made from cholesterol in the body. So when you are stressed, your body's saying, give me more cholesterol because I need to create more cortisol because you're in this fight or flight response and you need that cortisol to survive. And one of the quickest ways to get that cholesterol in is to eat all of those foods. I always say foods beginning with C and ending in E. So the chocolate, the cookies, the cake, the coffee goes in there as well, the cheese, Give me anything that's high fat, high sugar, because that is where the cholesterol comes from. But you might also be going for those high sugar foods or high carbohydrate foods when you're stressed, because you get a very short serotonin boost from them. So we know if I eat it, you may get the dopamine hit because it's sugar and it's that reward center. But you also do get that little burst of serotonin as well, which is your happy hormone. You feel good for a little period afterward, but it is not long lived.
So you mentioned at the beginning that when we have good gut health, it actually does the dopamine thing and gives us those happy hormones as well. So what is the path to the longer term kind of health and kind of serotonin boosts that are longer lived and boost our mental health?
Yeah. So I think one of the ingredients that people often forget that we need when it comes to mental health is protein. And our diets are quite protein devoid these days. But there's a very fine balance with protein. Eating too much protein has a negative impact on the gut microbiome. But eating sufficient protein or the right amount is going to help provide you with those raw ingredients to be able to make your neurotransmitters. But if you think of the Western diet these days, surrounded by, a cereal or slice of toast for breakfast and maybe a sandwich for lunch, we aren't getting that protein in to support our mental health. So starting to think about, eating more foods from the earth. If you're wanting to think about gut health and helping support your gut health long term, trying to look at things like as simple as, can I eat 30 different plant foods in a week? And whenever I say that, people immediately go, oh, well, that's not even achievable. And when people think it's not achievable, they don't even try. But if you think of making a salad, instead of making a salad with lettuce, you might make it with watercress and rocket and baby spinach leaves. Already you've got 3 varieties of food in something that's just the base of a salad. Then you can start to think about adding beans and lentils into your diet. And you might do a 3-bean stew for a breakfast or a lunch. And already having 3 varieties of foods, and that again is just the base for it. You can also then add in your carrots and your onions and your garlic and whatever. So 30 different plant foods is one of the suggestions to help support your gut health. And it's because the gut microbiome likes diversity. It's like a family with fussy children. Different children eat different things. So your gut microbiome, different bacteria in the gut eat different foods. So having that variety means that you're feeding a variety of bacteria in your gut. And we know that the health benefits, especially your mental health benefits, come from a diverse gut microbiome. So you want lots of different families of bacteria in that gut microbiome to help support that mental health. So I think I would say, try pick one thing to do, one thing that you can do sustainably, and maybe let that be 30 different plant foods in a week. And I'm not talking about just fruit and vegetables. I'm talking about fruit, vegetables, grains, beans, lentils, nuts, and seeds. They all count as plant foods. And just starting to think about a little bit of variety in those types of foods, and having your meals based predominantly on plants is also going to help you achieve those 30 different plant foods in a week.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. Okay, I want to go a little bit left field. So obviously, I want people to reach out to you, like if they want specific advice and guidance on their nutritional health. And I know you've got a wealth of resources, and we'll give people your details in a minute. But I want to talk about gut instinct. You know the phrase like, oh, like follow your gut instinct. And without knowing fully the science behind it, I rate that kind of experience, right? And people talk about the gut brain and the head brain, and sometimes I make a decision that's not like fully proed and conned with the logic, right? But I'm just like, and I do this in my business all the time. It just feels right, and I will say this to my team, and they'll be like, "Well, your intuition, if we want to use that word, is usually right, so we're going to go on how you feel." Like I don't know, is there, what's the science, if you even know, like is there a connection, or would you find that just like hocus pocus, go eat your 30 vegetables?
No, it's definitely not hocus pocus. And I think following your gut intuition, I don't really know the science behind this, so I'm not an expert in the field of gut intuition, but we know that 90% of signals goes from gut to brain. And if your gut isn't functioning properly, if you've got, if you went away and got a food, an infection like food poisoning, think about those times and whether you could tune into any gut intuition then. And I would think that the answer would be no. And the same is opposite, right? If your gut isn't functioning properly, do you feel like you can have that gut intuition? That would be my question, but I'm afraid I can't really answer it from a scientific basis because that's not something that I have delved into.
I think we're both onto something without maybe having the references or the books, like just through life experience and the bits that we each know from different angles, is like when you're aligned with your body. And I feel like in a world of kind of apps and tech and all these things, like even you wear your Fitbit and it tells you your heart rate and you're this and you're that and it buzzes you, and there's so many different health devices, many of which are very cool. But I feel like an offshoot, and I'm curious about your thoughts, are that we are losing the ability to listen to our own body. So what does my body need? What would nourish it? And I think you're right. Like if some of those things are aligned, like my gut health, my environment, my stress levels, different things, then it's easier to be like, this feels right, and feel confident about like, I'm going to go in this direction, even though I might not know all the variables. So there's something about, do you think tech is helping us listen more acutely to our body or less? And I know that's a black and white polarity, and there's nuance, but what are your thoughts there?
It's a very difficult question to answer. And I agree with you in the terms of, I think people are losing the ability to really tune into their body and know what their body wants or needs. And tech may help in a way if you view that tech as right, I wear an Aura ring. So if I wake up and my Aura ring says that I've slept amazingly, am I going to go around during the day going, oh, I've got lots of energy because I slept amazingly? Or if I wake up and my sleep score was awful and my readiness score is awful, am I going to go about the day thinking, this is what my Aura ring said, so surely this is how I should feel? But rather, okay, this is what my Aura ring said, but how am I actually feeling? How am I going to go about my day? Am I going to actually change anything? Because it's also one thing having the information, and it's another thing doing something with that information. So I think we need to be careful with tech. I think it's great if you're always go, 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 and that's the thing that's going to stop you from going. I think it's a great addition. But I think you have to also be aware that just because something tells you you're in the green, maybe you should question it and, check in and see whether are you actually in the green in terms of how you're feeling, or are you not?
Change throughout the day. I mean, I get that some people have more nuanced medical conditions, and tech can be great at tracking certain things, and so we're kind of not saying it's right or wrong, but I don't use any device anymore. Like I had a Fitbit, I had different things for working out and health and whatever, and I find maybe it's because I'm more of the addictive, my nervous system's a bit more wired because of trauma, different things. It made me lose touch in a way with just going, how do I feel, what do I need? And the people out there from the Zoes and the Whoops and all the things are gonna cry witchcraft, right? Because they'll be like, "What? We are so nuanced. We can tell you everything about you that you didn't know." Great. And for some people, or for a period of time, perfect, right? But I'm like, I don't lose. For me personally, I don't want to lose the skill of listening to my own body. I mean, you use the Aura Ring. You said, is there anything else you use particularly to help you measure your health?
No, I don't. I don't.
Interesting. Any particular reason, or it's just the way it's
I think because I've been into health and wellness. I mean, I was 16 when I started reading up about how to become healthy. And I think with that, you very much start to tune into, okay, I'm making these changes. How actually is it making me feel? Because that's what people don't really do. Like, they know if they've gone on a diet, they feel great. When they go off the diet, they feel awful. But obviously, they don't tune in enough to go, okay, well, I don't want to continue feeling awful. So I'll keep on eating healthy food. So I think I'm just really in tune with my body. I am quite perceptive. I exercise a lot, and I know if I've exercised a lot, if I walk up the stairs and my legs are aching by the time I get to the top, I need to rest a little bit more. So I think I'm just a bit more intuitive, and I don't feel like I need the external sources to tell me it, or how I'm doing.
which says to me, I mean, you've trained your body and that connection to your mind. So what meaning you give to the information your body's telling you,
Yeah.
which says to me it's a skill that can be developed over time, no matter who you are, right? And of course, you've gone then to be a full expert, but I think each of us can develop that skill. I want to spend our last little bit of time before I kind of connect people to your details, just thinking about the workplace. Big topic, but people are like, okay, individually, like when I'm on the weekend or on holiday, like maybe they're like, I have these routines. Where many of us are in a hybrid world, right? So we got 2 days at home, we got some days in the office. So like our routine is like a little bit like different each day for some people, which I think can throw off our habits and be like, okay, now I'm just grabbing and going, or I'm out for lunch, or these different things. Not to mention, you know, cultures and toxicity and managers and the whole kind of thing around it. Where so there's two things. Like, what do you think is possible for the individual in this world of work? And then maybe we can just think about, like, is there an organizational responsibility when it comes to this? What are your thoughts, just to start with the workplace and the individual?
Yeah, I think each individual should define for themselves what their non-negotiables are. And what days you need to be in the office and what days you need to be at home. So perhaps those days at home, you plan in more of the activities that are going to fill your battery if you know those days in the office are going to drain it. I mean, people are completely different. Some people get energized by going into the office and doing all of those activities. But I think everybody just expects to be well. They expect to do all of the work, their working day, and they just expect their bodies to work and to function optimally. But that's not actually true. I think the environment that we live in means that we need to pay more attention to how we actually look after our own bodies and our own mind as well. And making sure on those days when you are working from home that you're actually getting outside into some fresh air and actually moving, because so many of the health conditions that we have these days are simply because of a lack of movement. I don't know if I've answered your question in the right way with regards to that working from home life.
Well, what I'm hearing is everyone needs a little bit of reflection time to be like, what is my body telling me? What does my week look like? Maybe do I have young kids? Am I single? Like, all of these factors might play a part in how you do some of these things or when. But
Yeah.
in a world of like survival mode and everything's urgent, I think this is one of the classic things, is like actually just taking a step back, taking those 10 minutes in the morning or on a Sunday evening to kind of go, this week ahead, how do I need to adjust my routines to prioritize health? And you said something pretty
Yeah.
profound, which is people expect to just be healthy. Like, it's
Yeah.
like, when you're a teenager, you can eat shit and you can just keep going. And I got two teenagers. So I'm like, how are you doing this? Right.
Yeah.
But then it's kind of stacking in your body, right? The
Yeah.
unhealthy things, and it's almost like a mindset shift. around, am I by default healthy, or am I by default, because of the world, the stress may be at risk? And so what do I need to
Yeah.
proactively do? Those were some of the points there, which I think are really useful. And so what about organizational responsibility? Is there any, or should there be?
I think organizations have bigger bang for the buck. And I think they do have a responsibility to their employees to help ensure that their employees are functioning optimally. And that's what we don't talk about a lot. We don't talk about, are you actually coming to work every day your best self? And so I think they do have some responsibility, but not only in terms of, you're responsible to make sure that your workforce don't get sick. Perhaps let's even turn it on its head to say you're responsible for helping your workforce perform the best that they can perform. What tools do they need to perform their best? And I really feel like the space of nutrition is a really big black hole in corporate wellness initiatives, helping people understand how their bodies are actually working and what do they need to get their bodies to work better. Athletes always focus so much on sleep and recovery and nutrition to perform their best on the sports fields, but we're not thinking the same for ourselves and our bodies in the corporate world. And why are we not?
And I think in mental health, we sometimes compare to physical health, don't we? When it comes to, we need the recovery time, we need the rest time, as well as in order to perform cognitively. But it's almost like we need to connect all the dots and kind of bring in, like, hey, if you want to sustain performance, reduce burnout, keep your talent, like all the things that we talk about from a mental health perspective, how are people nourishing themselves? And how are you enabling that to happen? What are your thoughts about, like, eating at your desk and just like blah, 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 even if it's healthy? Like, is that, you talked about the microbiome, and like, are we giving the right messages then, or no?
No, not at all. So we've got two nervous system modes: your sympathetic nervous system, which is your fight and flight, and your parasympathetic nervous system, which I like to refer to as your rest, digest, and repair. You can't be in both at the same time. You can't be in fight and flight and rest, digest, and repair. So if you're sitting at your desk shoveling food in whilst concentrating on something else, you're not digesting that food at all.
So there is something to be said about the old school lunch break,
Yeah.
perhaps getting away from your desk, perhaps going
Yeah.
outside, perhaps prior to eating, having a couple minutes to like, just kind of get
Yeah.
into a certain place. And it's not just fluffy, because that's what people say, like, oh, you're not hardcore then, or you're not, back in my day, we just soldiered through, and like as if there's something wrong with people, right? It's like, this is actually enabling my long-term performance, as well as, of course, mindset and sleep and priorities, not to mention meeting culture and stupidity that goes on these days that's inefficient. There's something about eating. Do you find that there's, like, is there this, you might not know the answer to this, but what's the most common misconception that people have when it comes to their nutrition or their health? Is there one or several?
That's a very good question. What's the most common misconception? I think the most common misconception is something that I've mentioned before, which is we just expect our bodies to work properly, to function optimally. The biggest misconception is that we don't need nutrients for our bodies to function optimally. We just expect them to.
And what are you? I'm just getting advice for myself now. Screw the audience. I'm like thinking about my own health and like, ooh, where are my gaps, and kind of how I'm investing in nourishing myself. What are your thoughts on supplements, vitamin supplements, that these sorts of things that are often sold, but I have question marks about, because I just feel like either I forget to take them, or a nutritionist tells me to take 25, and I'm like, ugh,
Yeah.
it's too much to
Yeah.
keep up with. Can we get everything from those 30 kind of variations in a week, or do we need something else?
Well, I think that we do, especially in the environment that we are in. But the supplement industry is not regulated. So anyone can make a supplement and say, these are the benefits of having magnesium. But, what's that form of magnesium, and can you actually absorb the magnesium from that tablet. So definitely get advice from a nutritionist where the supplement is specific for you. I think where also we go wrong is we hear, oh, that supplement is great for that, and that supplement is great for that. So you start, taking them without, what am I actually trying to get out of it? Am I taking it for long enough to actually reach that point where I'm going to notice the impact of it? So I do believe in supplements, and in my clinic, I do use supplements, but they are very specific for the individual. And I always do caveat with, if anyone is ever on any medication, you definitely do need to get advice, because so many vitamins and minerals and CBD is coming out everywhere now. But so many vitamins and minerals and ingredients that are in supplements can interact with medication and either make that medication irrelevant in the body, so not useful at all, or it can speed up the effect that that medication has. So definitely getting advice from a qualified nutritional therapist, ideally. But the key ingredients that I think people are really missing these days are things like magnesium and B vitamins, because those are depleted in times of stress.
Interesting. And just to turn on the mental health piece as far as medication, of course, some people need medication. I personally think many antidepressants are oversubscribed and not taking into account lifestyle and other environmental factors. But do you think, and I know this is a broad term medication, but it's a foreign object, right? It's a foreign supplement that goes into your gut, right? Is there risk there? Like, just do we need to do something to kind of support our gut health if we're taking medication?
No, the emphasis when you're taking medication is more on the liver, actually, because the liver has to detoxify that medication and then excrete it. So I'd be focusing a bit more on supporting the liver with lots of different colored fruit and vegetables and things like that. There isn't really generally, some supplements do have an impact on gut health. Some medications do have an impact, but as far as I know, antidepressants don't.
Beautiful. Thank you. I know we bounced into all sorts of areas, from the workplace to the individual, and I totally went off script, but I completely appreciate it. I have one question that I ask all guests, so I'm going to go there, and then we'll kind of connect with where you're at. And the question is, what's the most radical change you think we need when it comes to well-being and the focus on mental health that we see in the world today? What's the most radical change?
Shifting the focus back to the individual, and that the individual needs to empower themselves rather than expecting all of the results to come from externally.
Beautiful. Beautiful, beautiful. Okay, Dana, thank you so much. Where can people get in touch with you? I know you're a keynote speaker. You've got a clinic. Give us a little insight into how people can connect.
Thank you so much. I love LinkedIn, so do pop on there and find me. I am Dana Chapman on LinkedIn. And my website is dc-nutrition.co.uk. You can find out more about the work that I do there.
Amazing. We'll be sure to put all that in the show notes as well so people can connect with you. Dana, thank you so much for your time, for the audience, also for me. I really appreciate your insights. Thanks so much.
Petra, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.